Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to cutting-edge knowledge. Today we're diving headfirst into, well, the really fascinating world of generative AI, specifically image generation. We're unpacking a really insightful new paper from Arcator, and it's all about something crucial for anyone creating with AI these days. How do we get more precise control and, even better quality from these incredibly powerful models?
That's exactly right. I mean, AI visuals are just stunning now, aren't they? You see these amazing sleeping cats, dogs digging, wild abstract art, even flying birds, it's everywhere. But the challenge, the persistent one, has been getting that really fine-grained control, tweaking specific elements or getting a consistent style down. It feels a bit like having this incredible magical paintbrush, but sometimes, well, the bristles just do their own thing. So this deep dive, it's really about giving you a clear path to understanding how this new research tackles that exact problem. It offers creators a really unprecedented guidance.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Where does the journey even begin? The paper really focuses on the foundational models, the engines behind these visuals. We hear a lot about diffusion models and flow matching models. They're super popular for creating images, videos, even 3D or 4D stuff.
Right, just to set the scene briefly. Diffusion models, they work by gradually cleaning up an image. They start from pure noise, like static on a TV, and step by step, they refine it into a clear picture. Think of it maybe like a sculptor slowly chipping away stone to reveal the form inside.
Okay, refining from noise.
Yeah.
And flow matching.
Flow matching is a bit different. It's more direct, more deterministic. It learns a continuous, smooth path, a trajectory, basically, from that initial noise straight to the final image. So it's less about lots of tiny corrections and more about following a specific guided path.
Got it. And for a long time, a big part of the success, especially with earlier models, came down to something called classifier-free guidance, or CFG. How did that actually help? And I guess, what were its limitations?
Oh, CFG was absolutely fundamental for boosting image quality, no question. It allowed the model to kind of balance two things: following your specific instructions, like your text prompt, and drawing on its more general knowledge. During the generation process, it effectively finds a sweet spot, interpolating between being super strict with the prompt and allowing the AI, let's say, a bit more creative freedom.
But it wasn't perfect.
Right. It had limitations. For one, it really only helps when you give it a condition like a text prompt. It doesn't really apply to other scenarios like inverse problems where you're trying to figure out the input or just generating images without any specific prompt. And maybe more importantly for creators, it could sometimes reduce the variety of the images. The diversity suffered a bit. You get high quality results, sure, but they might feel a little, well, the paper says oversaturated or overly simplified.
Oh, okay. So maybe
Well,
less creative exploration sometimes.
Exactly. Great quality, potentially at the cost of breadth.
So we've got these powerful models, a common guidance method like CFG, but with definite trade-offs. Now, the paper also talks about how the underlying architecture, the very structure of these models, has been changing. Early ones, like Stable Diffusion 1 and 2, use these U-Net architectures. You mentioned that funnel shape, downsampling, skip connections.
Yeah, that was the standard for a while. But things have shifted quite significantly, actually. More recently, the field's really moved towards transformer-based architectures. Think of the diffusion transformer, or DIT. These have largely taken over from the older convolutional structures. Why? Because they just scale better, much better, especially as models and datasets get enormous.
Okay, but what's the key difference with these DITs functionally?
Well, the crucial thing is that DITs don't really have that clear single bottleneck layer that you found in UNets.
Right, okay. So if I'm following this, the problem becomes the AI's thinking is spread out more. It's harder to just tweak one specific spot to get an artistic effect you want.
That's a great way to put it, exactly. Imagine trying to fine-tune some really complex machine, but all the controls are scattered everywhere instead of being on one central panel. It's harder to know exactly where to make that precise adjustment. And in practice, yeah, it means applying traditional image editing techniques or perturbation methods gets more complicated. Because the high-level stuff, the semantic features like what the image is actually about, that processing, is spread more uniformly across the whole network.
And this paper goes even further, focusing on something newer still. Multimodal attention-based diffusion transformers, MMDITs.
Yes, MMDITs. They're really the state of the art now, powering models like Stable Diffusion 3 and FLUX.1. What's really revolutionary about them is how they handle everything together, the image patches and the text prompt simultaneously. They enable what the paper calls fully bidirectional interactions, which basically means the model can deeply connect the visual information with the text information.
Leading to richer results, presumably.
Far richer, much more nuanced generation. It understands the relationship between words and pixels much better.
Okay, so we have these really sophisticated models now. And the paper points out that within the AI, these things called attention maps naturally encode structure, both spatial, like where things are, and semantic, like what things mean. So the idea of attention perturbation guidance is basically to nudge the AI's focus, push it away from bad results.
Precisely. You're trying to guide its internal gaze, so to speak, during that denoising process. But for these newer transformer models, the DiTs and MND-DiTs, there's that hurdle we mentioned.
The lack of a clear bottleneck.
That's the one. Without that distinct layer where you know the high-level concepts are being processed, it's much harder to figure out where to apply the nudge. The processing is just distributed across many, many layers, so those older heuristic methods, the ones that often targeted specific known layers and units, they just aren't as effective anymore.
It's like trying to fine-tune that decentralized control panel again. The old tricks don't work as well.
You got it. And that specific challenge is exactly what this new paper tackles head-on. It introduces this really ingenious algorithm they call HeadHunter.
HeadHunter. Okay, so how does it solve this precision control problem in these complex new models?
HeadHunter is, it's quite clever. It uses what they describe as an iterative, objective-aware selection process. Essentially, it systematically checks out individual attention heads. You can sort of think of these heads as mini specialists within the AI. Each one focuses on a slightly different aspect of the image. So the algorithm generates images, it subtly tweaks what these mini specialists are paying attention to, and then it measures how well that tweak contributes to the visual outcome you actually want.
So it finds the specific heads that matter for a certain effect.
Exactly. It lets the system identify precisely which heads are responsible for which visual characteristics. It's like methodically finding those hidden control knobs one by one.
And they made a really cool discovery related to this about compositionality with these heads. What does that mean for practical use?
That's maybe one of the most exciting parts. The clever bit is that if you identify multiple heads for a guidance, say, one head influences lighting and another controls shearing distortions, and you guide using both of them, well, their associated visual concepts also combine in the final image. You get both effects.
Oh, wow. So you can mix and match concepts.
Exactly. It strongly suggests that guiding at this head level isn't just tweaking pixels, it's giving you true concept-level control. You're directly manipulating core visual ideas, light, texture, structure, even abstract qualities.
Okay, so we can find these specific mini-experts, these heads, and combine them. But how do you control the strength of that guidance? You don't always want full blast, right? The paper talks about ways to continuously adjust the intensity. One method they mentioned is soft perturbed attention guidance, or SoftPAG.
Yeah, SoftPAG. It's actually a pretty straightforward but really effective interpolation strategy. Think of it like having a dimmer switch for the guidance instead of just on or off. You basically blend the original attention map, what the AI would normally focus on, with a perturbed version, the one guided by the selected heads. And you can smoothly adjust the mix, the ratio between them.
So it gives you finer control than just, say, a general guidance scale.
Exactly. While other parameters might influence the overall strength, SoftPAG offers this really fine, continuous adjustment specifically for the attention perturbation. And what they found was interesting. Sometimes softer adjustments, maybe spread across a few more heads, actually gave the best overall visual results. It's about finding that sweet spot between precise control and maintaining the overall quality and coherence of the image.
Makes sense. And the paper didn't stop there, right? It explored other advanced perturbation methods using this kind of interpolation idea.
Absolutely. They really dug into different ways to modulate this guidance within that interpolation framework. It's quite comprehensive. For example, they looked at something called uniform guidance, which is interesting because it basically pushes the attention towards maximum entropy, telling the model, in a way, to attend equally to everything.
How did that turn out?
Well, the results were kind of surprising. The paper showed that while it could sometimes help preserve the main structure of objects, it could also introduce these really bizarre, unintended elements. They had these examples, like generating a lighthouse scene, and suddenly the AI throws in a framed picture on a wall or even a swimming pool in the background.
Whoa. Okay, so not always the intended effect.
Not always. It really highlights how these models can sometimes interpret guidance in unexpected, almost overly literal ways. They also refined methods like applying Gaussian blur, which is tricky in these complex multimodal models, using something called softened selective guidance, or SoftSeg. And they looked at intuitive ideas like softmax temperature scaling, basically turning a knob to make the AI's focus sharper or softer. And then they proposed their own improved version, max guidance or softMG, to get that sharpening effect more stably.
So lots of different ways to dial in the control.
Exactly. Each method gives you a slightly different flavor of control, a different way to fine-tune the AI's internal gaze. The core idea is giving creators that dimmer switch, not just an on-off button for these effects.
Okay, let's talk impact. What does this all mean for people actually using these tools? The results for HeadHunter, especially for style-oriented quality improvement, sound really impressive. And we're talking about huge models here, right? Like Stable Diffusion 3 has, nearly 600 attention heads? And FLUX.1 Dev has over 1,000. HeadHunter finds the useful ones in all that complexity.
It's potentially a huge deal for creators, yeah, because you can start achieving very specific stylistic goals without just wrestling with the text prompt endlessly. The paper shows great examples using HeadHunter for styles like sunlit, warm glow, golden hour, makes images significantly more vibrant, just like you'd hope. But it also works for more abstract styles, like getting a clean line art look or a flat paper cut effect. And the really key part, this style tuning happens without changing the underlying model weights.
So you don't need to retrain the whole giant model.
Nope, it makes it a really lightweight and importantly reusable preference tuning method. You find the heads for your preferred aesthetic once, and then you can apply that setting easily. It's like creating your own style preset for the AI.
That reusability is definitely key. But how well do these selected heads generalize? Do they only work for the exact prompts they were found with? Or can you use them more broadly?
That's a critical question, and the results here are really encouraging. The paper shows that the HeadHunter selected heads actually generalize remarkably well to unseen content prompts. Prompts the system wasn't explicitly tuned on. Their tests, using human preference scores and other metrics, showed significantly better results compared to the baseline model. And the performance was often comparable to, or even better than, standard CFG.
Okay, so these heads seem to be learning something genuinely stylistic, not just memorizing specific examples.
That's the implication, yes. They seem to capture robust stylistic features.
Which leads to another fascinating point they explored. Are these heads capturing an intrinsic style? Does the effect show up even if you don't ask for that style in the prompt?
Yeah, they tested that too. They tried applying these selected heads in what's called an unconditional setting, basically, using a null prompt, giving the AI no specific instruction. And in some cases, quite interestingly, the visual traits associated with the head's original style still appeared. They had examples where, say, head selected for cinematic lighting would still give cat images that cinematic feel, even without the prompt asking for it.
Suggesting the head itself kind of encodes that style property.
Exactly. It suggests some heads might encode intrinsic stylistic properties that just influence the generation process, prompt or no prompt. Now, they do caution it's not always the case. They talk about polysemanticity in head behavior, meaning a single head might be involved in multiple different concepts, so its intrinsic effect might be weaker or more mixed without a guiding prompt. But the potential is there.
Still, the idea that individual heads encode interpretable visual concepts is powerful. Can you give us some more concrete examples? What kinds of things can these individual mini-experts control?
Oh, the examples in the paper are really illustrative. They show heads that consistently induce very specific effects. Things like distinct changes in lighting, modifications to the overall structure, or shifts in color. For instance, they identified specific heads that could reliably generate peach-pink tones, or apply a full-on cinematic style. Others could introduce natural light with shallow focus, or effects like vignetting, even things like vertical or horizontal grain, a CGI render look, or a striking rainbow neon filter.
Wow. It's like finding the individual specialists within the AI's brain.
That's a perfect analogy, each specializing in a particular visual element or flourish.
And we keep circling back to this idea of compositional behavior. How does combining these specialist heads actually play out for someone trying to create an image?
It offers incredible flexibility. That compositional nature means you can mix and match these head effects to fine-tune or amplify styles. Imagine you have a head that gives the nice vintage film style, and another that adds a warm red palette. Combine them, guide with both, and you get an image that beautifully integrates those two characteristics. Or you could maybe take a golden hour lighting head and combine it with one that produces a glossy plastic texture. You can create these unique hybrid aesthetics. It allows for this really granular, almost conceptual approach to image generation, like having a sophisticated mixing board, but for artistic styles and visual concepts.
Okay, this all sounds incredibly powerful. But let's talk practicalities for a second. What about the computational cost? Is HeadHunter something that requires massive resources, only usable in big research labs?
That's a really important practical point, and the efficiency is actually one of the major advantages highlighted. Yes, there's an initial computational cost involved in the selection process, finding that optimal set of heads for a given model and a desired effect. You have to run those evaluations. But, and this is key, that cost is amortized. Once you've identified a good set of heads, you can reuse them again and again across different prompts, different image seeds. Unlike some other methods that might require optimization for every single image you generate, HeadHunter adds basically negligible overhead at inference time when you're actually making the image.
So once you've done the setup, using it is cheap.
Very cheap. It just involves modifying the attention calculations for a small, fixed subset of heads. You're not changing the model architecture. You're not adding extra computational passes. So yeah, it's designed to be a very lean and efficient way to get this deep level of control, making it potentially practical for everyday creative work, not just research.
Okay, wrapping this up then. The core takeaway seems to be that this research offers a pathway to a really unprecedented level of precise, fine-grained control over AI image generation. We're moving beyond just typing broader and broader text prompts, hoping for the best, and into a space where creators can potentially manipulate specific visual concepts directly within the AI's own process. That feels like a significant leap.
It really does, and it leads me to a final thought, maybe something for you to mull over. If we can now not just, ask an AI to create something, but actually guide its internal creative process with this kind of detail, choosing which internal eyes or hands it uses to apply specific artistic touches, what does that unlock? What entirely new forms of artistic expression, what new digital design workflows might emerge from this deeper, more collaborative partnership between human intent and the AI's capabilities? How might this fundamentally transform creative fields in the coming years? It's a pretty tantalizing glimpse into the future of artistry, I think.